The Tomb Kings have one of the most unique campaigns in the game, especially for a faction that occupies settlements. They have their own system of recruitment that allows them to focus on capacity over cost and can craft powerful items to enhance their characters. They've remained relatively unchanged since their release, but still keep up as being a pretty strong faction despite their lack of updates. Let's first go over the pros and cons of the campaign gameplay. First of all, the pros: they have free armies, recruitment, and upkeep, so it lets them build whatever comps they want without having to worry about money. The Mortuary cult lets them craft powerful items to further buff characters, as well as unlocking new armies and units. And finally, the Buxom and Nagash have a ton of buffs for the faction, so if you can collect them all, you'll be pretty damn powerful. As for the cons, they have a fairly slow start to their economy, with not a lot of ways to make money outside of battling, even with the free armies. If you can't constantly build recruitment buildings, you'll also be running a ton of skeleton armies, which quickly become useless. And finally, they don't have a lot of friends, since they hate chaos and evil factions, but equally, none of the good factions get on with you too amazingly either. Let's now go over each of the different factions, their mechanics, and their starts. First up, we have Khemri. They're led by Settra, the Imperishable. For their faction effects, they gain 50% more allegiance points when in allegiances with other Tomb Kings, they have -1 construction time for all buildings, and 20 growth in all provinces. For the Lord's Army, they gain 10% casualty replenishment rate, 100% to Settra's leadership aura size, and +1 to the local recruitment capacity. The faction, of course, starts in Khemri, and the starting army has 2 skeleton warriors, 2 halberd tomb guard, 2 skeleton archers, and 2 skeleton archer chariots. They also start with a Tomb Prince hero. For the climate preferences, wasteland, savanna, and desert are suitable, mountain, temperate island, and jungle are unpleasant, and frozen, magical forest, ocean, and chaotic wasteland are uninhabitable. For their victory conditions, you must destroy the followers of Nagash, Court of Barras, and the Drakenhof Conclave, as well as occupy, loot, raise, and sack 30 different settlements. The starting war will take you east, securing you 3 provinces and 3 Great Pyramids. After this, you can head south to take out the Necrac Brotherhood, and if you keep going, you'll find Manfred and can take him out to cross off one of those victory conditions. After this, you should head west to find more desert lands to bring under your control, all the way over until you find Arkan and take him out too. Once the whole desert is under control, you can take an army east to find Kalida and finish off the last of your faction quests. You can then focus on expanding north into the Badlands to take on the swarm of legendary lords up there and get those settlements up. Next we have the Exiles of Nehek, and they are led by Grand Hierophant Katep. For his faction effects, he gains +2 to hero capacity for Lich Priests, -25% to all right costs, and -25% to the Mortuary called crafting cost. For his Lord effects, he gains +25% to character XP gain for heroes in the army, and +10% to campaign move range. His faction starts in the Clorac Spire, and his starting army has 3 Nehekara warriors, 2 skeleton spearmen, 2 Nehekara horsemen, and some Necropolis Knights, as well as a Lich Priest of Light hero. For the climate preferences, it's mostly the same as Settra, but mountain moves to suitable, and frozen moves to unpleasant. For the victory conditions, you must awaken all 4 legions of legend in the Mortuary cult, as well as the 30 settlements. To awaken all of the legions of legend, you need gold, canopic jars, and a bunch of tradable resources, either through ownership or trade. To help with the settlements, we'll go with direct ownership. You can get the first couple of them from the starting war, so finish that off to get them on the go, and have a little base of operations for yourself. After this, your best bet is heading to the northeast. There's only one resource here, marble, but if you get it first, you can then go straight south, where just about everything else is found. You'll be fighting your way through ogres, Skaven, and dark elves to get the marble, but once they're taken out, you won't have a ton of powerful enemies to challenge you. After this, all you need to do is take over pretty much everything going down to the Fallen Gates, and you'll have all the resources you need to awaken all 4 legions. You'll also have a ton of settlements, so have all the victory conditions met for the short victory royale. Next up, we have the Court of Barras. They're led by High Queen Kalida. For their faction effects, they gain 10 relations with all factions, +15% to the research rate, +4 control in all provinces, and +20% ammunition for all armies. For the Lord effects, the army suffers -50% attrition, takes -3 corruption wherever it goes, and enables poison attacks for all units in the army. The faction, of course, starts in Barras, and the starting army has 3 skeleton spearmen, 3 skeleton archers, 2 skeleton horse archers, some with Shabti Greatbow, and a Screaming Skull catapult, as well as a Lich Priest of Nehekara hero. The climate preferences, again, very similar to Settra, but mountains and jungle move to suitable. For the victory conditions, you must destroy the Silver Host, the Necrac Brotherhood, the Drakenhof Conclave, and the Size of Morcaine, as well as the 30 settlements. The Silver Host is a starting war, so take those out first to get a starting province under control. You can then move through the mountain pass to break into the desert, or you'll find the rest of your targets, like the Necrac Brotherhood, before Manfred, to take those out too, before heading north to find the Size of Morcaine, along with all the other lords in that area. If you do this, then set to work taking over the whole of the desert and Badlands area, you'll have all the conditions met in no time. And our final faction is the Followers of Nagash, and they are of course led by Arkan the Black. His faction can recruit a number of enhanced vampire count units, gains +1 to the army capacity right out the gate, has -50 relations with Tomb Kings, but +60 relations with Vampire Coast and Counts. For Lord effects, he has +10 to the Winds of Magic reserve capacity, and +5 melee attack for all units. His starting location is in the Wizard Caliph's Palace and the Sorcerer's Lands. His starting army has 2 Crypt Ghouls, some Skeleton Warriors, 2 Skeleton Spearmen, 3 Skeleton Archers, some Hex Wraiths, some Fellbats, and a Tomb Prince hero. His climate preferences are the same as Cetra, and for his victory conditions, he must destroy Khemri and the Court of Liberas, as well as the 30 settlements. Follow the starting war and take on everyone you come across to make your way across the northwestern coast of the desert. After this, keep to the desert and move east to find a few Tomb Kings, and stop Cetra to take him out before he gets too strong. Now you can either take your time taking over the desert to build up some power, or head straight into the mountain pass to track down Kalida and take her out to tick off the factions. Either way, you just need to take over the desert and Badlands, and you'll get the settlements in no time. Now it comes to the faction mechanics. First up we have the Books of Nagash. Across the map there are 9 Books of Nagash, and each Tomb King can claim 8 of them, with the exception of Arkan, who can get all 9, and the 9th book grants him those vampire units, which he has from the start. Each one has unique effects they grant the faction when collected, so collecting them all can have some pretty powerful effects. They are spread around the map, so collecting them all will be quite an undertaking during any campaign, but it gives you a lot to do in the late game if you make it that far. The Day of Awakening is the recruitment process of the Tomb Kings. This one is pretty simple. The Tomb Kings don't pay for units with recruitment or upkeep, and they instead recruit units based on a capacity system, where each recruitment building increases the capacity of units in the faction's pool. This means you need to build many more recruitment buildings than usual to make sure all your armies can have the units they need. Dynasties are how Tomb Kings keep their balance in check. Their army capacity, that is how many armies they can have and not how many units per army, is determined by research and the Mortuary cult, which we'll come to later. The research tree is split into dynasties, and each dynasty you research will increase your army capacity and unlock options to increase hero capacity and add special lords to your pool. The Mortuary cult is where the Tomb Kings can do a bunch of crafting. The crafting here uses gold, tradable resources, and something called canopic jars. These are collected from buildings, characters, certain events, rites, post-battle captives, missions, and more. They can then be spent on different crafting projects like Regiments of Renown, hero and army capacity, and items like weapons, armor, enchanted items, talismans, and arcane items. This is just pretty simple crafting. If you have everything you need, then just click craft and get to work using the items or units that you've unlocked. There are also unique Great Pyramids spread through the desert that can only be built by the Tomb Kings. These buildings have unique effects for the faction and province, so are all worth collecting and building if you can. There's a bunch of them in this central desert area, so if you make it here and take all the lands nearby, you'll catch them all, no problem. And finally, the Tomb Kings have access to rites which can be used to grant the faction various effects. They each have their own gold, cooldown, and duration. The incantation of Tahoth adds a casket of swords to the recruitment pool and increases recruit rank for units and lords. This is of course great for the powerful units and recruiting stronger units right out the gate. The incantation of Patra summons a Necrotect hero, which can colonize runes straight to level 3. This is great for speed growing a new settlement. The incantation of Kassar causes all regions belonging to you to be hit by attrition causing sandstorms that only affect foreign armies, as well as increasing ambush chance for the faction and granting all armies the sand availability. This is great when defending your lands. The great incantation of Geheb grants canopic jars and growth, as well as reducing the construction cost for all buildings, and grants the Tomb Swarm army ability. This is of course great for building up provinces across your empire. I'll go over the Lord skills. First up we have Cetra the Imperishable. Since he's a spellcaster, you want to get those spells online as soon as possible to get all the value you can in combat. Grab anything you want. The lore isn't amazing, but there are a couple of good spells buried in there. After this you can go for the Patra the Great Father line once he hits level 10, and get a bunch of buffs to himself, his army, and the faction. The Blue Tree is next, grabbing Soul Reaper and Canopic Jar Hoarder for extra replenishment and more jars for more items. All Is Mine and Lightning Strike are great for more gold, and then Renowned and Feared is always amazing. Top row has a bunch of buffs for himself, the army, and then we go into the passage to the Soul Realm tree to get a bunch of buffs for endgame units. Finally, any spare points can go into the Indomitable Will to upgrade his power as a fighter, and if you can handle a chariot, then damage and charge bones are the way to go, otherwise just as much damage as possible for the War Sphinx. Next up we have Grand Hierophant Katep, same star Cetra, going straight into the spells and grabbing anything you think might be useful, then going into Geheb the God of Earth, and the entire line since it's got great buffs for basically everything. After this, the top row has resistance, hero buffs, campaign buffs, and an XP share, so they're all great picks. Then we go into the Blue Tree, going all the same choices as before, since they're still the best. And the red line to buff endgame units, and then no combat buffs to be found, so any extra points can go into the Blue Tree for a bunch more army buffs. High Queen Kalida, no spell, so straight to the blue line, picking up all the same options as usual. At level 10, go into the Asaf the Goddess line, and grab everything for a ton of buffs to the faction and army. The top row has buffs to herself and the local province, then head into the red line to buff endgame units. Finally go into Indomitable Will to buff herself in combat, focusing on attack and speed. Next we have Arkan the Black. First of all, head into his spells to get him at max power in combat. Again, the lore isn't amazing, but he's better using them than not. Once he gets to level 10, go into his Uzirian line and grab everything for buffs to himself, his army, and the faction on the whole. The top row has buffs to charge bonus, resistance, campaign, HP, and an XP share, so are all great. Then go into the blue line for all the same choices as usual, then into the red tree for endgame units, and finally the Indomitable Will line, focusing on speed and damage for his endgame chariot. And our one and only generic lord is the Tomb King. First you have the blue tree, go in all the usual choices. Once you can, choose one of the 4 god skills, and I like Uzirian for the most replenishment and fast recruitment. The top row has buffs to charge bonus, resistance, campaign, HP, and an XP share, so are all great there. The red tree for those late game unit buffs, and close out in the Indomitable Will tree to buff them in combat, focusing on damage for their War Sphinx. Next up we have the heroes. First we have the Necrotechs. On the campaign map, these can damage walls, wound, block armies, boost income, and increase mobility when embedded in an army. These belong in your armies alongside a ton of constructs to get the most out of their skills and abilities. Start out with increasing mobility to get the army around the map, then head into Indomitable Will, focusing on weapon strength and attack. Once you unlock the skills along the restore line, grab them all for great buffs to constructs. Then the topper has resistances and an XP share, so all great choices. Finally, the Inscription of Fear line has a ton of buffs to constructs and capacity, so grab your preferred units. And lastly, boost income and canopic jar holders for more gold and jars. On the campaign map, the Tomb Princes can assault garrisons, assassinate, assault units, spread control, and provide training when embedded in an army. If you want them to be campaign assassins, then go assassinate and specialist, and then everything else on the blue tree aside from training, and you're done. If you want them to be battlers, you instead go training, and then the entire Indomitable Will line for all sorts of battle buffs. At level 10, you can pick one of their 3 skills above this, and I like either Heir of the Chariot King or Royal Lieutenant for great battle buffs. The topper has a few buffs for their resistance, HP, and an XP share, so all great. And finally, you can spread control and get Canopic Jar Hoarder for more passive gains. And finally, we have the Lich Priests. On the campaign map, these can damage buildings, wound, hinder replenishment, cleanse corruption, and replenish troops when embedded in an army. They also come the Law of Light, Nehekara, Death, or Shadows. You always want to take these guys into battles, otherwise you're just wasting their spell potential. Go into the spells first and pick up any you want from your chosen law. Afterwards, you can grab Replenish Troops for a great buff to the army, the top row for resistance and the XP share, and finally, Cleanse Corruption and Canopic Jar Hoarder are great final picks. The Tomb Kings also of course have commandments. Worship of Petra increases campaign move range for armies starting their turn in the province and increased growth. This is of course useful for growing settlements and speeding up your armies in your own lands. Worship of Asaph increases control and reduces corruption. This is useful for keeping control of provinces. Worship of Kassar increases ambush success chance and melee defense. This is great for buffing armies battling in the province. Worship of Jaff increases replenishment rate and recruit rank, which is great for healing up armies and recruitment. Worship of Vakf, I'm guessing, increases income from buildings and reduces construction cost of all buildings. This is great for more income and building stuff cheaper. And finally, we have the research tree. As mentioned earlier, the Tomb King research tree is split into dynasties, and each dynasty increases their army capacity and reduces the research rate to make sure you don't blast through them all and get 15 armies on the go by turn 10. Each dynasty then leads into 8 techs. You have 1 lord, who is a standard Tomb King lord but with a unique trait. You have 3 that increase the capacity for the 3 hero types, and you have 3 that improve units, and 1 that improves the campaign. You can either rush each dynasty to get armies on the go as fast as possible, or complete them one at a time to maximize your research speed while you have it. There's also a segment at the end that has a bunch of follows to unlock with Canopic Jars, and one final increase to army capacity and some global recruitment buffs. That's everything you need to know to play the Tomb Kings in campaign, and we've got the battle guide coming next to run you through the entire roster as well as compositions and more, so subscribe if you want to see that. Hoping to hit 50k by the end of the year, so I would appreciate the assistance. Also, join the Discord to vote on who the next guide should be for. Voting closes in around a week, so make your choice before it's too late. If you enjoyed this video and or found it useful, then consider dropping a like. If you really enjoy the content and want to support it directly, then consider becoming a member on YouTube or a patron on the Patreon. Doing so gets you early insights into future content, increased voting power, discounts on merch, as well as shoutouts at the end of videos like Henry Tucker for his support at the officer's tier. Thank you to all supporters. One last thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.